Da da da! What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and on top of that, oh my goodness, I thought I was ready to go again. And yeah, sometimes it's in those small adjustments, that we make and doing the it repetitively over and over and over again, recognizing where we get things wrong, where we get things right, that eventually we hit it, right? Eventually becomes second nature, that we don't have to think of it when we're in the process of doing something else, like me just giving myself a little bit of air here. I usually do that when I come in and do my lives, because I figure sometimes I just get a little bit steamy in my conversations. And I don't mean steamy in any way, except that I just kind of feel better when I'm just kind of feel a little bit looser, a little bit freer, a little bit in that letting go state, to see what wants to come to the surface in our conversations. And it is a learning process for me. I bumble along in my story just like everybody else does. And it's in our choices. And I didn't mean to mention choices, but it is a topic of discussion, in how we're being set up in our lives. We're not making those individual decisions on our own. We can try to, we can make those choices, but it is in our environment, it is in what's butting up against us and affecting our life, that it actually affects the choices that we make. And that's the truth. That's the truth for me. That's the truth for everybody. And we can be as determined and right as fundamentally strict and right, get everything correct, and we would still find that we are subject to our environment. We are subject to the people that are in our lives, right? Lots of times I have good intentions. I feel like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk today. And then my sister will phone me and say, oh, Cindy, you want to go thrifting today? Well, of course, I'm going to put that walk off to the side, right? For numerous reasons. One, it's, we're resellers, so I make money if we can find product, and I'm not going to find product and just going for a walk. There's no thrift shops or anywheres where I can pick up items when I'm on these walks. And this week it has been cold. We actually, for most part of the week, we were in the minus 40s with the wind chills. And I hear the grumbling, I hear the moans and groans out there about the minus 10, the minus 15. Well, you want to try minus 40? I went to the store today, and just as I was walking out the door, my sister called me and she looked at me, and I just like, I freaked her out or something, because I was geared up. My head actually, maybe, well, a little bit. I don't like to exaggerate even. So we're going to say my head was big, because I was bundled and I was ready to go. And I was surprised today that it was a little bit milder outside. We didn't hit those big numbers. So those cold spells, at the very least in my province, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, if you've never come into one of my lives before or hung out with us, and I may be on my own tonight, and it does happen on occasion, and I am good with that, because I understand that in this moment not everybody has that opportunity to sit down in a conversation. And I just trust that, wherever that message is supposed to hit, and I never, very rarely know what that message is going to be. I leave that for you guys to feel it out in those conversations. And again, it's in your choices, right? Whether you want to come in the moment, whether you're not going to come in at all, or, after work or after the kids are put off to bed, or when you get up in the morning with a cup of coffee. If you enjoy my company, I appreciate the company, because again, I am bumbling along with everybody else, and it is in that consistency and that repetitiveness of me showing up every day that I do get a little bit better. Not a little bit better in presenting a message, because what comes out just comes out, but allowing that partnership with myself to be I think, a nice combination. It's like making a chocolate cake and making a blue ribbon chocolate cake, right? In the consistency and in the repetitiveness of showing up, in the course corrections of those consistent little mistakes that I make all the time, that eventually it gets through there and we get a little bit better. It took me over a year to come in front of the camera. And that's an honest truth. And the only thing that got me to this point was in just showing up day after day after day. And if you don't know, I'm here 6 days a week at the moment, because again, it's change. Change is ever constant. And again, our lives bump up against us, and we find that we have to adjust a little bit. Sometimes in that consistency that we do finally, right, get it to sink in, that we find that it isn't so much of coming in and practicing and coming in and being consistent, that finally, right, we realize, oh my goodness, by George, she's got it, right? And then at that point, maybe the pivot will be for me to not do as many shows, but be more in depth and more in partnership with myself, where, those lessons have sunk in, that I have built up a little bit of mental consistency, that mindset, that I'm able, right, on those days when those other parts of me feel that they need a little bit of a day off from Cindy too, that I can hold my own, rather than just the in and out of both of us. And I appreciate that I'm comfortable enough to come into my live shows and just be myself. Lots of people aren't themselves, right? They come in, and, if you're anything like me, right, in that highly sensitive, empathic manner, we feel out those content creators where we want to sit with, we want to learn with, and we want to be able to trust that sitting with us and hanging out with us is not going to cause any detrimental issues for themselves. But again, if you're anything like me, you understand it is in that environment, it is in that consistent, it's in that always showing up, that we actually get to realize, right? Sometimes you got to make a mess to clean a mess. And it's in those lessons that we learn to be more resilient. And, you know, I came across a post recently. It was a few weeks ago, because this was something that really, really ate at me. How people can be so involved in video games, how they can get on their machines early in the morning, and still 2 o'clock in the morning, they're still at it. Every single bit of their attention and energy, and allowing these games to frustrate them, agitate them, put them in that frantic mode like that. And I think to myself, what do they get out of that? Right? What do they get out of that? It's the same thing. that I get of in showing up here every day, being consistent. It's the resilience and the patience. The patience to say, okay, maybe I don't have this game down packed, right? Just like I say, maybe I just don't have my platform down packed. But in that consistency, right? We get to learn to be accountable. We get to learn to be resilient in failing and being destroyed by a monster and having to start the game all over again. And in doing that, you get to learn patience, understanding, right? And along with that, right? Sometimes it is beneficial in a way that the fact is we are taking in lessons that benefit us. And, maybe that person who is playing games all day long, that's the lesson for them in the moment, right? Is that resilience and that patience. Because, especially when you play with other people, you don't want to look like a bad sportsman, right? You want to be in good sportsmanship. You want to build a community and you want to be a part of a community. And I don't play video games. I never have. It's never ever been my thing. Oh, Galaga. We're going back a ways. I think that's the late 70s or early 80s. Galaga. Oh no, it was Space Invaders, right? And Pac-Man, but these were arcade games at the time. They weren't video games. So, as soon as your pockets were empty of quarters, that would be the end of it, right? But when Nintendo and Ataris, all those things, my dad in the 70s and 80s, he loved technology. He was on it, the big 7-foot speakers and the big 2001 Space Odyssey televisions, right? And then these video systems that would come out. And I'm grateful that my dad had an opportunity to be able to experience that era. And as much as I'm going to say that, because just before I came live, I'd like to say how grateful I am that I got pulled into this age of AI learning. There was a good chance that, right, being somebody who was not technically inclined, who wasn't drawn to video games, that somehow I ended up online. I know exactly how I ended up online. I ended up online in selling fur coats. We're going back a long ways, right? Computers first came out, and I was making a living. I was putting a roof over my head with buying thrift store finds of fur coats. And at that time, there were some models and some movie stars that were really making fur coats huge. And coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba, right? That we had an abundance of fur coats in the thrift stores, and I would pick them up for under $10, and I would list them, and I would get 3, 4, 5, 6, $700. I don't think I ever made more than maybe $800 or $900 on a fur coat, but I sold a lot of them. I would start selling fur coats in May. I think in May, yeah, end of May, I would start selling fur coats, and I would stop selling fur coats at the end of November because, lots of people buying fur coats would have them shipped off because they were Christmas presents for their friends. So that way I would take December, January, February, March, April, and most of May off. So I was only working half the year and making a year's income in that. And I was doing so good. Now you can't find those $10 fur coats or anything anymore. And I moved past that. Life is change, and it's a matter of making those choices that will affect that change. But I am so grateful. I'm taking this moment just to say I am so grateful that I got pulled in, and that was the beginning of it. My eBay store where I was selling fur coats, and I needed computers and taking pictures. So it just kind of inched my way into it, not realizing that it could expand so much that I would find myself online every single day, right? At that time, there was not even any YouTube channel, right? Now they're saying that it's just like, oh my goodness, what are they saying? $30 billion that they pay out to content creators every year. At this moment, I'm not one of those creators that is making a bundle of money on their channel, but that's okay. For me, again, I am so grateful for the opportunity and the the not the know-how, because I didn't come into it with any know-how. It was just Googling questions and watching YouTube videos and then being inspired by thought leadership, because you do need that little bit of encouragement and inspiration, because right, I was well into my 40s when I started online, but as a creator, I was well into my 50s. I was well into my 50s before I actually started, but it wouldn't have happened at all if it wasn't for those small choices. And in the end, they were big choices. And to understand how important change was, that I knew that if I was going to carry on already being mature, because when I started as a YouTube creator, I was an urban explorer. I was bushwhacking. I was exploring, road tripping, and exploring abandoned houses and abandoned farms and one-room schoolhouses and abandoned churches. And it was in those times with myself, because I didn't know anybody who was interested in the same things I was. And on top of that, you know, I wasn't particular in being employed. And that's an honest truth. I felt that it was taken away from that life that was so valuable to me. I wanted to enjoy my life. I didn't want to be under others' thumbs. But I was, because again, we all have to make those choices when we have to put a roof over our head. But I always worked as fast as I could by my own choices, right? Again, to climb that ladder as fast as I could so I could be like supervisors and managers. And I never got to be the point to being my own boss, except in these situations where, I was selling fur coats, and it was in me to be an entrepreneur, even as a small child. And it's funny that I'm saying that, because yesterday, if you've never hung out with us, I have another show. It's called Chatters Live. I have an amazing crew. If you guys ever wanted to come in on Sunday nights, it's 7:30 Central. But because, right, we delve into some heavy topics, and I don't mean for it to bleed into my Sunday nights, because my Sunday nights is supposed to be fun night. It's where we just all get together and keep it light. But I find sometimes, in being imprinted in the conversations and in the lessons, that sometimes, right, these conversations do move in a little bit into that live show, Chatters Live. Amazing crew over there. They've been with me for 10, 11 years, most of them. But I decided yesterday that we were going to keep it light. It was going to be a nice, light evening, an hour and a half we do on Sunday nights. And I was just going to tell funny stories. My audience was going to tell funny riddles and funny jokes. And the conversation I made a point of making sure that it didn't go into those really heavy, right? The mindset, the inspiration, the motivation that doesn't always hit well with everybody, right? And I do have a loving, tolerant crew that love me and right and join me and have their own conversation, and they they do. I know they humor me in what I do quite often, but I think it's so sweet that they love me anyway. So I decided to do that little bit of give back yesterday by making it a light day. And like I said, uh I didn't bring the heavy into my live show last night, but I didn't get to my funnies. And I had written down a few funny stories, funny experiences in my life so that I could, right, not necessarily go from point to point, but to actually have a little bit of reference just in case, I felt that I was trailing into something that was heavy. And then I could just go, oh, okay, well, let me tell you about this story. But right now, when I was talking, I was talking about having that entrepreneur in me since I was a little kid. And I remembered yesterday that one of my funny stories that I had written down, I didn't get to tell it. Mind you, I think I probably told it before. But, my early days as an entrepreneur with my little sisters. I believe I was probably 10 years old because I only remember I was 10 years old because it was my first bike. It was had a banana seat and those great big monkey bars on it. It was for somebody who must have been 6 feet tall because I couldn't touch the ground, and it was hard for me. I had to go up to the stairs and to get on to mount the bike. Once I was on the bike, it was fine, but getting on the bike was like getting on a 6 foot high horse. It was kind of hard. So this is how I remember how old I was because that was my 10th birthday when my dad got me that bike. And I remember how apologetic he was to me because it was a handmade bike that one of his, I don't know, poker buddies or one of his work buddies had given him to give to me as a birthday present. And he was so apologetic that it wasn't a new bike. But I remember how appreciative and how excited I was, how I thought I had the best dad in the whole world who would give me such a thing. And I rode the heck out of that bike. I loved that bike. And if you can imagine, it was a hand built bike, big tires, but it had these big monkey seats on it, and it wasn't one of those monkey bar bikes either. It was because it was homemade that it looked that way and had big steel back on it and everything. It was a really cool handmade bike, I thought. And I loved that bike. Oh my goodness, so much. But that's not the story I wanted to talk about. I wanted to tell you that living in that house and being 10 years old. So my second oldest sister, Tracy, she would have been 9 years old. And then my next sister would have been 4 years old. And then my youngest sister hadn't even been born yet. But we lived in Vancouver at that time, British Columbia, and they have a park. They called it Queen Elizabeth Park, but we called it Little Mountain because they had the planetarium up at the top of the mountain and everything. And what me and my sisters would do on the weekend is we'd take my mother's root beer bottles, and she'd right A&W used to have these great big glass bottles, and my mother used to have the Watkins root beer syrups, and she would make homemade root beer for us kids, right? And so we would take the empty bottles and right, poor kids, we didn't have any sugar, right? And if my mom found out we took her sugar, we'd probably be in big trouble. But we'd spend a few cents and we'd get packages of Kool-Aid, and we put a couple of packages of Kool-Aids and we'd really water them down because they were like 5 gallon jugs. And we had these red wagons. I think they called them Red Riders. Maybe it's a Red Rider. I'm not quite sure. It sounds to me that was the gun, but it was those red wagons, right? That they had, and we'd put all these big bottles on the wagons, and we would strap them down, and we'd take some party cups because there were always party cups, paper cups for the birthdays and stuff, mom's cupboard, and we'd take those, and we used to wheel it, and we'd have to walk quite a ways, right? Like we could see um Little Mountain, what we called Little Mountain, from where we lived. But in all actuality, it probably took us an hour to walk there, right? And all three of us little kids, we would get on our prettiest dresses and stuff because my mother taught us that trick. It was influencing and be able, oh, such cute kids, right? And we knew it worked. And the thing is, we get up to Queen Elizabeth Park, and what they had is like flower gardens and stuff in this park, and we go and take the elastic bands, and we tie bundles of dandelions up. Really, we'd pick dandelions, and if we could get away with picking some flowers, right? We're not supposed to pick the flowers in the gardens and stuff. They were for the tourists, right? But sometimes we would get the roses and the daisies and stuff, and we'd make little bundles of bouquets of dandelions and flowers and stuff. And we would go up to the planetarium. They had a big planetarium there. And the tourist buses would pull up in front of the planetarium. And buses were so hot, and they were full of tourists, right? And we would all be dressed up with our little cardboard boxes with our Kool-Aid jugs there. And everybody would think we were cute, and we'd have floaties. We'd have floaties in the Kool-Aid and stuff. And people would buy our little bundles of dandelions and give us $5 and say, keep the change. and our Kool-Aid would last forever because, right, nobody wanted to drink the Kool-Aid. But a few would buy them, and then they would over tip us, right, in the purchase of this Kool-Aid. And sometimes they would even drink it, and it would just be, you could just see on their faces like they were chewing on a lemon, right? And we made a lot of money. Like, we made a lot of money. When I say we made a lot of money, when you're talking about a 10-year-old child, a 9-year-old child, and a 4-year-old child making $100 in the course of the day, because we'd stay there all day. Sometimes, right, I'd send my second oldest sister to go all the way home to get us more Kool-Aid packs, and we'd take our jugs to the bathroom. Because they always had these restrooms, right? Like when you go in a provincial park or something. And we'd be trying to fill up our 5-gallon jugs with these little paper cups, these little, in those days, this is the 70s, right? So they were Dixie cups even. And we'd be filling up these 5-gallon jugs in these dirty restrooms. And oh my goodness, we made so much money, right? Like, we always had that entrepreneur nature to us, me and all my sisters. And we knew how to influence that way. Like I said, the cute ponytails and the ribbons and the cute outfits. Well, what we thought were cute, right? My mother always bought her clothes in the secondhand stores, but we make ourselves as cute as we possibly could because we knew that it influenced, that people would say, oh, look at those little kids. They're so cute. Look what they're doing, trying to make some money. And, of course they would purchase the dandelions. What are they going to do with them? They're going to walk into the planetarium and going to throw them in the first trash can that they come across. They were just doing it out of kindness, out of appreciation. And if they were drinking my coffee, they were just doing it because the bus was so the bus was so hot. But oh my goodness, we never even drank that Kool-Aid. Things are a little bit different now, but it was just an indication that, we had that, in us already, that sometimes, it is in our circumstances that we pick up uh, qualities, just like the kids who play video games this um, all day long and all night long. That even though as people that aren't from that generation who just don't get it, or we're screaming at our kids that they're wasting their lives, go get a job, that there is something that they do learn in that. And I never considered it, and I thought of it so much ago, like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to these kids? Like, we did this to the kids, that they're going to be absolutely useless in partnering with wives or husbands because they don't have other skills that they're building up. But they're building up that resilience for whatever's coming their way in life, that they can be able to take those hits. And learning resilience is important. And resilience is that learnt trait that specifically comes from difficulty, right? Like getting smacked upside the head over and over and over again, that you finally learn to dodge like that, and maybe you become the next world champion in boxing because you got so good at that. So in my own experience, I think it was just in that build up. Right now, I'm not going to come in here and say buy my Kool-Aid. I'm not going to sit here and you guys know I come in however I am in that moment. I'm not going to come in with tons of makeup. And you know what? It was something that I did, just quitting makeup completely, the same time as I got the gumption to come in front of the camera. I find that absolutely amazing because I was somebody who was very self conscious about how I looked, right? I was always concerned about what other people thought of me, not so much what they thought of me, here and here. But I really, my physicality, it was something that had impacted me as a small child, as a teenager, as a young adult, and even in my mature age. And if you don't know, there was a point where I was 311 pounds. I was a big girl, right? And I had an operation that allowed me to lose a lot of weight over the course of a few decades. I have gained maybe 50 pounds back, 40 pounds back. We'll say, oh yeah, 40 pounds. I've gained 40 pounds of that back. But that took decades to happen. And in that process, I learned to become more accepting of myself, right? More tolerant of myself. This being on this platform here on Google, that I have learned so much about just being accepting of where I am in the moment. And if I want something, right, it's going to be in my choice. And if I achieve that something, right, it's because I consistently and repetitively showed up to right, get better. And this is what I do every year. I set my goals for the year, the things that I need to accomplish, whether it's in my personal life or here with my brand or in my relationships. My relationships are important for me, and they've had their challenges in themselves because, again, we don't always rub each other well, We don't. Even within our own families, we don't rub each other well. And that's the truth. But, right, it is in that practice and in that resilience and caring, right, that we can actually make something that's not working work, not just make it work because it has to. We don't have any choice, but make it work because we become the evidence for somebody else that it can work, right? That sometimes when we rub each other badly, we just go, "Oh, forget them," right? Hate their attitude, right? They just don't show. But then you don't give them a chance. You're just like, see you on the beach, and you're gone. Some of my best friends have come from people that that didn't rub me well. And again, right? And it's in the exact same period as this idea of when I said when I was 10 years old and we were kind of like entrepreneuring and making big bucks on the weekend and stuff that I met my best friend, Beverly Edwards. Uh, I think I was maybe in grade 5 or 6. And yeah, maybe grade 5 or 6. I remember her, the Beverly Edwards, and I'd walk down the hallways of school, and oh, she scared the poop out of me. She looked like an Amazon woman, and she was the same age as me, but she was like 6 feet tall. At least at that time in my age, I thought she looked 6 feet tall, big, not heavy in the very least, but like Amazonian, right? Big figure, big boobs. Like I hadn't even started growing mine yet. And she was like fully mature. And she walked down that highway hallway, and I'd be walking, and she'd turn around the corner and go, "Oh my goodness." And I'd be looking for ways to escape her because every time I passed her, she would just slam me in my shoulder, right? She'd never say anything to me. She never said hi. She never said anything nasty to me or anything, but she just liked to beat on me a little bit every time I walked by her. And I would probably much prefer that little punch, even though I was a little bit cautious of her, than what the other kids were doing to me at the time, because even back then I look at pictures now, and I wasn't as big as I was made out to think I was, but at the same time, being the sensitive I was, I took it in. And those name calling and getting picked on and stuff, I was very self-conscious, and I try to avoid these people the best that I could. But I was a big girl, I felt, and I didn't feel invisible, even though I wanted to be invisible. I was walking home from school one day, and a group of girls surrounded me. It was a regular thing coming home from school. And I was brought up to turn the other cheek. If my mother found out I was fighting, she had this ratty old pink, and it wasn't pink, it was gray now. It was so old, tulle dress from like the 1940s. It was just a scary looking dress. And she would put me in that dress, and she'd make me go to school all week. I'd have to wear this ripped gray, which was once pink dress, totally out of style, but it was meant to teach me a lesson about fighting, right? Caused me more issues than any lessons that it offered up to me. But I guess maybe I did learn the lesson in the end, because, you stop fighting because you just don't want to wear that dress anymore. But I was walking home, and this group of girls just pounced on me, and they beat me, right? And they were beating on me pretty good, and there was no me. I think I was on the ground at the time. And Beverly Edwards, this big black Amazon woman who was, like I said, she was probably 10 or 12 years old too, but she looked full grown and scary, right? And scary looking. And she jumped them. And there were like 5 of those girls. and she pounded on a few of them and they just went running, right? And since that day, she walked me home. And since that day, she became my bodyguard. And not only did she become my bodyguard, we talked, right? We got to know each other. And then I didn't have friends coming to my house, right? Because, I come from a dynamic family. I didn't want my friends to know my dynamic family. I love my father, I love my sisters, but my mother was borderline and very, right? You never knew when she was going to blow. And when she blew, she didn't care who was around her, right? Unless she was out in public, then that was a different story. So I never had sleepovers. I never had my friends over at the house. If it was a birthday party, it was usually out in the backyard where my mom could just stay in the house and stuff. But me and Beverly, we became such good friends. And I'd go have sleepovers at her house. And she was the only one I knew. Well, I knew another girl who didn't have a father, but because her father passed away. But I never met somebody whose husband had walked away. Like, nobody in my family had ever divorced. I didn't know anybody who just had one parent, but I did, right? Finally meet Beverly. And her mother was such a beautiful lady, and she made the most amazing chicken bean rice. It was so good. Now, I did pick out the beans because, we were all colorful and stuff. I had never seen anything like it. And it was a southern dish or anything. But she always made it all the time, and it was absolutely delicious. But I'd always have like my beans all squished to the other side. And she also, I guess she kind of got a feeling of the life that I was having at home. And she probably could tell by the lack of hygiene and the clean clothes, dirty socks, right? That I needed a little bit of caregiving in that. And it brought me to the point where I could understand that it really does take all kinds to make the world, because she wasn't somebody that I would even think that, I would be able to be friends with. That I didn't even think that it was possible that I would even want to or consider to have her as a friend. But because she was not always kind, because she was a tough girl, right? She was a tough girl, and it didn't stop her from giving me those punches in the arm. But those punches were not out of malice. By even at 10 years old, I already learnt intent. I knew exactly what intent was, and there was no intent in that. And I think honestly, it was her way of getting my attention, because she appreciated my friendship just as much as I appreciated her friendship, right? And grateful even at that young age that my dad had decided to give his kids free choice. It's not that that free choice wasn't influenced or manipulated to get to somebody else's choice, but I felt I had free choice, right? And in my friendships, I felt like, I could choose who I wanted to be my friend. And it was amazing experience for me, because I learned that lesson. It takes all kinds to make the world. Now, not that exact phrase. I didn't really get the gist of it until, oh my goodness, well into my 40s. When an employee who was a slacker was caught sitting at the cashier, chatting up the cashier, and I'm going like, "What are you doing? Get back to work!" Like, he goes, "But I'm just sitting here and talking." Yeah, but you're getting paid for that. And he just looked at me and he says, "Yeah, but Cindy, it takes all kinds to make the world." I just laughed because it was so true. It does take all kinds to make the world. It is that diversity that's going to make it so that, we can evolve, that we won't go extinct. Who wants to be the same as the next person? It's in our experiences and being the example for somebody else that they get to discover that they like that too, right? Oh my goodness, that's something I can do. I never knew that was possible. Oh my goodness. Like, we're supposed to be the examples for each other, right? I grew up in a household where it was do as I say, not as I do, right? Because I said so, you know and not to have that freedom within those confines of the household. Once I was outside, playing with my friends or going on adventures, that was a totally different story. But once I was in the household, I was, right, directed in how my life was set. But to be able to have these different experiences and to be around different people, and even people that don't rub you well, right? And not brushing them off, not just going, oh, that's an a hole, without even getting to know why that person is an a hole, right? Like, that we get to make those choices ourselves, and also possibly to build up a little bit of resilience to whatever reason they're punching you in the arm, to actually recognize that was just a way to catch your attention, that maybe they were looking for a friend too. Moving forward from that, I think that was a good lesson for me, that it made it possible that I didn't always have to look at, the it girls, and the popular girls getting the popular guys, and to recognize that I can make friends with anybody if I chose to, right? And leave it to my own decision whether somebody is a good person or a bad person, right? Because, just because somebody is pretty or well built or well educated or have good parents doesn't mean that that person is going to have those particular traits, right? You know, Lots of times they end up to be mean girls, right? Sometimes they end up to be jocks that are just playing all the girlfriends and all the side chicks, right? And everything. And actually, they bring that up into their own adulthood. I believe my friend Beverly Edwards was a really good influence on me. But I have to be honest in that by the time she was 16 years old, she had already had a couple of children, right? She was a totally different person than I was, right? But sometimes we get to be the evidence for somebody else, right? In our faults, in the things that we don't get right. And we go, oh my goodness, I never want that to happen to me. Or, oh my goodness, if I ever came home and had to tell my parents that I was pregnant, oh my goodness, I don't want to ever have that experience. And sometimes in somebody's negative experience, sometimes in the mistakes that other people do, sometimes in even in that intent that we get to recognize that we don't want that in our lives for ourselves. It's just not being the experience by being the good person, the bright person, right? The well built person, having the good job, making lots of money, being good in sports, right? You really got to take all aspects into consideration, right? And just feel for yourself, right? And again, like I said, sometimes we don't give that opportunity, right? We just look at him and go, forget him. I'm not even going to try. I don't even want to know him, right? And sometimes we do that just because somebody else said that they were not a good person, right? Oh, you shouldn't hang out with them. If you hang out with them, you're not hanging out with me anymore. I say, somebody's going to give you an ultimatum like that, so be it. I'm really sorry. I liked you. I would have liked to have spent more time on you. But you know what? I judge people how they treat me. But maybe I have to um, judge the fact of how somebody is going to treat the other people in my surroundings too, right? Because, if you're in a group of friends, that's why I always stress these base values. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much. I'm doing good tonight. I hope you're doing good too. I appreciate you popping in. Can always count on Eugene to be here and say hello. So you guys know I talk all the time about those baseline values for people, right? That people need to be able to get along with other people because we rub each other uncomfortably, right? That if we have those baselines, right? If we can tell people, right? When you heard me say a-hole, I'm not a big swearer, right? I very rarely. I didn't grow up in that household. We were not allowed to swear. And by the time I turned 18 and was allowed to swear, it just wasn't part of my system, right? And of course, every once in a while, in frustration, you let one fly, and it's a surprise to you that you have that gumption and that you have that inside of you to do that when you get surprised or you're frustrated or somebody jumped out at you or something, and it's just instinct, right? You never want to jump out at me. You never want to surprise me because if you're an arm's length, man, right? You think I had a black and blue arm from what Beverly Edwards did to me, right? Walking down those hallways. Wow, you scared me and you were arm's length. You would just get it right in the forehead because I just go straight to protection mode, right? I go right into uh, get this out of here, right? Move it along, take it out. And I'm not sure if I'm triggered that way anymore. I would guess probably I am. It's been a long time, right? Since anybody has jumped out at me and scared me. And my sisters know not to ever do that because they know I will react right away if I feel that physicality coming at me. Okay, you guys. Yeah. So I thought I'd tell a little story, but it kind of trailed off because it was kind of relevant in a couple of other stories. But if you can have a little bit of tolerance sometimes, and if you trust yourself not to be influenced, like I trusted myself. I wasn't going home pregnant and going through that. Tell my parents that I'm pregnant and stuff, right? If I had kids at 16 years old, I would have had a totally different life, 100%. I never had children, right? Maybe I would have enjoyed being a mother. Maybe it wouldn't have been a bad life, but it definitely would have been a different life. And I can guarantee you, I wouldn't be sitting here right now being able to do what I do. And again, just to throw a few gratefuls out there, because we don't always know. It's in our everyday, day to day. And if we just don't stop, if we just keep making the best choices that we can and just put one foot in front of one foot in front of another, right? Eventually we'll come to where we're supposed to be. And I bet you'll be just as surprised as I was. Okay, you guys, let's quickly grab a card. If you don't know, 54 powerful words. Let me have a sip of my coffee. I just took my vitamins. I got a little bit of heartburn. Ones I'm taking right now are kind of acidic. So, and I'm taking other things to go, like eating things to go with them so that they can metabolize properly too. So it's giving me a little bit of heartburn. And this is a new one for me. So, but I think it's working, right? I feel the benefits already. I feel, oh my goodness, I feel 100 times better than I did like even at the, oh, it's the beginning of week right now, beginning of last week, in the past week. Like I just, right? Sometimes you hit them properly, right? I don't know if I'll carry on with it, but we're going to give the body what it needs. And I don't think it's just the body because this seems a little bit clearer too. Okay, you guys. If you don't know, we just grab a card. It's a powerful word. We go into it for a couple of minutes and then we call it a night. Okay. Let's pull. Ooh, that came out pretty good. I saw the C and I thought, oh my goodness, we got the community card away. But you know what? This is a good one. Creation. It's another card I haven't pulled out of this deck yet. Creation is a collaboration of a desire and an action. And that's the thing, in choices, we make the choice and then you have to put that action towards it. Otherwise, it doesn't have any chance of manifesting, right? We're just going to go straight to the couch with the remote control. But this idea of creation is a collaboration, right? In partnership for what you want, right? And in action. So this is a perfect example of what I do when I plan my trips. You guys know I go on these big provincial park trips in September. And this week or this year, I'm going to try for going away for 3 weeks. That's the plan. That's the plan. But it's always a plan. And it's in setting those goals and then just moving towards them, right? And in my creativity, what parks do I want to go to? What campsites do I want to have? Do I want to be lakeside? Do I want to be in the forest? Do I want to be near a comfort station, right? What will be the actions toward that? Because sometimes when I go on these trips, I'm going to dig crystals. That's right. I did a one year I just went out and every provincial park I went to was close to a destination that provided some form of crystal or rock digging, and I planned the whole trip around that. But in the moment of being creative, right? In setting those goals, those desires, those things that we want for ourselves, right? Like those big fancy SUVs that I take on those trips. It's in my own action, saving the money, right? Doing the research on the parks, doing the research and whatever I have tagged, right, for my audience, because you guys know that I film my trips every year. I'm also a Google guide, so I have to take that in consideration too. So I look at landmarks and I also choose my parks that don't have a lot of photographs of them and stuff. So it gives the public, more options and more ideas. And I hit on some of the most amazing parks that might not be super popular, but would be if people really knew how beautiful they actually were, right? So that's my creation. One of my creations is my September trips, but those trips would not happen, right? If I just had the desire and I didn't put the action towards that desire, how disappointed would I be in September when it was time to go on my trip and I didn't have enough money and I didn't have a good vehicle, right? And so I make my list of everything I need. Already, I got a new tent because you guys know my tent got destroyed. So I put it on my goal list. And then when my sister asked me, what do I want for Christmas? A pop up tent. And she got me my pop up tent. So I scratch it off my list, right? And the different things that I need personally in my personal life, right? That's creative too, right? Because you have to think, right? How is Cindy going to do that on that little pension, right? How is she going to accomplish these things? Well, just like when I was a little kid and we made that Kool-Aid and made those little dandelion bundles, right? You get creative and you put that action towards it, and right, it manifests somehow. But if you don't, if you just have the desire, right, you have a couch and a remote control, what's that going to get you, right? At least I tried. And in that process of trying, and even if I fail in that, even if I don't accomplish that trip in September, I learn through my failures in that, in how to make that mistake, not make that mistake again, right? Yeah. Creation. Creation is a collaboration of a desire and an action. Okay, you guys, that's all I've got for you tonight. I'm going back to my applesauce and my cup of coffee here, and that'll be a night for me. You guys have a great night.